Can you hear me?
Okay.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Sasa, for inviting me to your conference. I have to say I'm very sad I cannot be there in person. I've been very much looking forward to coming to Japan in October and visiting some schools, but of course the World Health situation dictates otherwise. We cannot travel, and it is a very good thing that we're not traveling at the moment, and it is wonderful that we have an alternative. But at the same time, I've been very much looking forward to coming to Tokyo and maybe other places in Japan, and I do hope there will be an opportunity for that in the future. Meanwhile, I am talking to you from the Netherlands, and I'm honored to be speaking at your conference. The picture on the right there is, of course, our national flag, and if you look very closely, you see a school bag. And that is the image that you see around the country when the exams are finished. So when the national central exams are finished in secondary schools and students have passed their exam, it is a custom to put out the national flag and hang the school bag from the flagpole, which I think is a very compelling and a very Dutch image. So my name is Onno van Wilgenburg. I work at NUFIC, which is the organization that coordinates CLIL in the Netherlands, and I will be talking about NUFIC a little later. I am team leader of the secondary languages team because apart from CLIL, we work with other languages in schools and try and support schools and help schools to reinforce their languages and to help the students communicate better. I hope that this says in Japanese, good morning, and I'm happy to speak at your conference. I hope that it does, because I put the English into Google Translate and then had Google translate it, and I also translated it back to Czech. So I'm fairly confident that this is a real Japanese sentence. And it's, of course, wonderful to use technology and to communicate with each other in this way. But I think this also illustrates the need for CLIL. On the one hand, it is very important to actually learn each other's languages and to learn as many languages as possible, but to also have a common language that we can use to speak internationally. And I think CLIL is a very good way of doing that. But anyway, so I'm going to speak to you about CLIL in the Netherlands, and not just about CLIL, about the whole concept of bilingual education in the Netherlands, where CLIL is one of the aspects, one of the primary aspects of bilingual education. And this is my structure. It's always nice to have a bit of structure, especially because I'm a little bit nervous speaking to you from oops, there we go, from behind the computer. So first, I'm going to give you some background information on the Netherlands and our education system. So just to give you some context. Then I'll talk briefly about the history of CLIL in the Netherlands. As the title indicates, we have been doing CLIL for 30 years, or in fact more than 30 years. I'll then talk about the characteristics of bilingual education, about CLIL, and also about the intercultural dimension, which is so very important. And then I will conclude by highlighting our quality system, the quality system that we have in place to evaluate CLIL through a system of appreciative inquiry. And then I have some conclusions that you may or may not agree with. So this is what I hope to be talking about in the coming 30 to 40 minutes. Now, the Netherlands, of course, just so that you have a rough idea of where we are in the world, it's the red country there next to Germany and above Belgium and France, very, very far away from Japan. Actually, it's quite interesting. It's 10 o'clock in the morning at the moment, and it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Japan at the moment. As you can see, we are a very, very small country. One of the smallest countries in Europe, or indeed the world, which means that we have a lot of foreign territory. So it's very easy for a Dutch person to come into contact with people who are not Dutch because the country is so small. And so there is a great need to speak other languages and speak the international language, which is at the moment is English. There are 17 million people in the Netherlands, or actually more than 17 million at the moment. Almost all of them ride bicycles, as you can see there in the picture. Some of them are on scooters, but most of them are on bicycles. We have 642 secondary schools, roughly, and 134 of them are CLIL schools. So you might say that CLIL is a marginal phenomenon in the Netherlands if you look at the number of schools and then the number of schools that has a CLIL department. But it is it's 134 is a pretty substantial amount, and we have at the moment 37,000 students in a CLIL department. So by no means the majority of the students in the Dutch system, but a substantial amount nevertheless. Here we have a model of the Dutch education system. Now, if you start at the bottom, I'm afraid some of the numbers have gone missing, but those are supposed to be ages. So from age 4, everybody is in primary education. Everybody goes to the same primary school, kindergarten, and then the years following that. And as you can see, by the age of 12, students finish primary education and then go into one of 3 main strands of secondary education. Those are the, oh, I'm sorry. Those are the, yes, the orange circles there. That is secondary education. So we have 3 different types of secondary education. The one on the right, VWO, stands for pre-academic education. So that is 6 years that prepare you for university. When you get the diploma from the VWO strand of secondary education, you have access to all universities in the Netherlands. Of course, if you want to study medicine, you will have to have had physics and science and so on. But in principle, you can get it to any university. The one in the middle, HAVO, is sort of the general secondary education. It's a 5-year program that prepares you for college. So the non-academic type of university. And the one on the left, VMWO, stands for pre-vocational education. Is a 4-year program which prepares you for further vocational education. So you might say that the Dutch system is a very streamlined sort of education. By age 12, students go into one of 3 strands. There's a big disadvantage to that, of course, because it's very difficult to move between types of secondary education. On the other hand, once you're in a specific type of secondary education, the cognitive level and the sort of the group is fairly homogeneous, which makes differentiation somewhat easier. I say this with a bit of hesitation because there are always lots of exceptions, but this is the general idea. Now, as I say on the left there, everybody goes to primary school, 8 years, so from age 4 to 12. And then there's a selection at age 12, one of 3 levels, and then bilingual education mostly happens at secondary school level. That is not to say bilingual education or CLIL does not exist in primary education or in further education. It does, but it is biggest in secondary education. And my presentation will also be about secondary education, and all the examples that I mentioned will be from secondary education. But please keep in mind that we do have primary bilingual and also vocational bilingual, which is becoming bigger and bigger. Now, just a bit of background. As I said, I work for Nuffic. That is our office there. that, of course, we cannot go to at the moment because of the COVID-19 situation. But it's a very nice office, even though it's empty now. We work for the Dutch Ministry of Education, but also for the European Commission. We have several programs for the European Commission. And one of our jobs is to coordinate the CLIL schools network. So, as I will be mentioning later, all the CLIL schools in the Netherlands are part of a network where they share good practices and, well, that we coordinate. And we also are responsible for the maintenance of the quality of bilingual education. And I will be talking about that in some more detail later. And there below are the green picture. That is the logo of bilingual education in the Netherlands. You see NAFEC, that's our name, and then TTO is the brand name of bilingual education. It stands for Tweetalig Onderwijs, TTO, which stands for bilingual education. So this is the logo that schools can put on their materials, or even put on we have a flag that schools can fly to show that they are part of the TTO, the bilingual schools network. Now, it is when you visit a bilingual school in the Netherlands, as I hope you will do and have the opportunity to do in the future, it is not the case that the entire school is bilingual. When we talk about bilingual schools, we mean that they have added a bilingual department. Schools add a department to what they already have. So they create an extra place, an extra opportunity for students who want to do part of the curriculum through another language, which in our case is always English. It's an extra choice, therefore, for students and parents and teachers also. It is not obligatory to do bilingual education for anyone. So schools offer an extra choice for the students, but therefore also for the teachers. It is not obligatory to teach in bilingual education. I will be talking about teacher training and teacher selection later on. It is even the case that becoming fully bilingual is illegal. The Ministry of Education has said that it is fine and very good for a school to start a bilingual department, but they must always offer a monolingual and Dutch alternative. So it is always possible to do the Dutch curriculum in Dutch at every school. Now, a quick history. This is an impression of the 1990s. Perhaps you recognize a few images there, because bilingual education began actually just before the 1990s, in 1989. That is when our first school began a bilingual department. And it started in international education. So there are, of course, schools that are completely international, such as the British school or the American school, maybe even the Japanese school. But there are a number of schools in the Netherlands that are Dutch schools and have an international department attached to them for expat children, or internationals as we call them now. And that international department teaches the international baccalaureate curriculum. Now, in 1989, some parents of students in the Dutch department said, oh, hang on, there are interesting things happening in the international department that we cannot do, that our children are excluded from. And that was the reason to start a Dutch bilingual department, basically a hybrid form of Dutch education and international education. And then in the 1990s, there was a slow but very steady growth of bilingual departments. Soon other schools began a bilingual department, and not only international schools, but also regular Dutch schools. And it really is important to mention that this was a grassroots movement. The schools organized themselves. It was the schools themselves that said, look, we want to start a bilingual department. And then the Ministry of Education gave NAFEC the task to organize a network of schools, or basically they gave us the task to organize bilingual education, and then we started a network to do that. But no school was ever forced to start bilingual education, and I think that is one of the reasons for the success. And then schools very quickly started to discuss the brand of bilingual education. What does it mean to be a bilingual school? What does it mean for you, and what does it mean for me? So in this early network, we had 10 schools around the table that had very strong ideas of what it meant to be a good bilingual school. This led to the formation of a standard, a document that specifies what elements of bilingual education have to be there for everyone. This was by no means a quick process. It took about 10 years for a document to emerge that all schools could support, but we have it now, and it is still a guiding document in the qualities process. So if you look at the standard, you find a few minimum requirements for bilingual schools, and I'll be talking about that also later. So this is how we started in the 1990s, and by the year 2000 there were about 26 schools, and now 20 years later we have 134. And here's a map of the Netherlands, and every orange marker is a bilingual school. So what is interesting to see is that there is quite a lot of bilingual education, but it is also not distributed very evenly. You see a lot of empty spaces. Now, if you can see my mouse, I'm not sure if you can, but here in the area around Amsterdam and The Hague and Rotterdam, that is of course where most people live. It's very high density, population density, so there are a lot of schools there. But it is not the case that here nobody lives. So we really want more bilingual education for the students that need it, the students that at the moment cannot go to bilingual education. And so you can also see that in some places there is more than one school to choose from. In some places, students can choose from 2 or 3 or 4 schools. And then in other places, there are no schools to choose from. So here we have the bilingual schools standard. Now, if you want to read it, it is available on our website in English. So it's a document that specifies minimum requirements for bilingual schools. So what are these requirements? So to name a few, 50% of all the subjects are taught through English. And it says 30% in parentheses there. That is for the vocational schools, 50% for the pre-academic schools. And that means that 50% of schools choose 50% of their subjects, which are then taught entirely in English. So it's not 50% of geography, but 100% of geography with a few other subjects that make up 50%. And it's also important to mention that we want a broad spectrum of bilingual education. So the sciences, the humanities, and the creative subjects must all have at least one subject in English. Another minimum requirement is that the students reach level B2 in year 3, B2 of the European Framework of Reference, which you may or may not be familiar with. But B2 is the pre-academic level, the level before C1, and C1 is the level where you can speak very confidently and without many errors on an academic topic, on an academic area. So the level before that is still pretty high, and it's for 15-year-old students, 15 to 16-year-old students in year 3. Very important. It's not just about CLIL, it's not just about language. Schools must have international cooperation. Schools must have international partners that students can work together with, that they ideally go and visit and have educational experiences with. Of course, in non-COVID times, this is very prominent. Schools, students going abroad, going on exchanges, foreign students coming back to the Netherlands to do projects. Now, in COVID times, of course, there is almost no physical cooperation, but it is very interesting to see that schools are starting alternatives. First of all, they keep in contact with their partner schools, maybe through email or through other forms. and start to look for alternative forms of online cooperation, and try to make sure that once we have a vaccine, or the COVID times are over, we can resume the international cooperation. This is very important. Dutch must not suffer. Our L1 must not suffer from CLIL. This is something that the ministry has given as a prerequisite. Now, I talked about the central exams in the beginning. You remember when I showed you the flag and the school bag. All schools do central exams, and we look at the results of those exams. So during an inspection visit, during an accreditation visit, when it turns out that schools score a lower mark for the Dutch national exam, schools do not get a certificate. Fortunately, this rarely happens. And another minimum requirement from the standard, and these are just a few, is that the school should have native speakers among the staff. Not just Dutch teachers that have done a course in English, but actual native speakers as teachers or as teaching assistants or guest speakers. Well, a guest speaker is not technically among the staff, but schools should make sure that students have contact with native speakers. And since our main language of CLIL is English, this can be native speakers from all over the world. We see people from Singapore, from Australia, New Zealand, India, and of course the United Kingdom and America. Now, as I think I've mentioned a few times before, CLIL in the Netherlands is not just about CLIL. Bilingual education is not just CLIL. So these are the three dimensions, if you will, of TTO, of bilingual education. First, of course, there is the language development, which is very important and which we achieve through CLIL. Second, is perhaps even more important, and is perhaps the reason for being of bilingual education, is global citizenship. Why do we do it? Not just to learn English, but to become world citizens, to be at home in the world, if you will. And three, is a very interesting one that has recently emerged, is that of personal development. Well, of course, all students, whether they're in CLIL or not, develop personally. But because of all the elements of bilingual education, the exposure that students have, and the things they do, the experiences they have, their personal development is very prominent and is very is interesting to see and to look at, and I'll be talking about that later. Now, language development, of course, is very important. So when we talk about CLIL, these are some of our associations. These are some of the things that we think about, and they may be completely recognizable of you, or you may have other focuses. I think the most important thing about CLIL in the Netherlands is that the subject teacher is also a language teacher. They have a dual focus. The biology teacher not just teaches biology, but teaches English through biology. It takes a while for teachers to fully grasp their added responsibility, their added challenge, and also the added fun, really. Teachers have a communicative approach. So the idea is that students actually use the language in the classes, that they actually read and write English actively and with great frequency. Teachers give language feedback. Of course, you as CLIL experts know that the idea is not that teachers correct everything that the student says or writes, but that they comment on the use of language to support it and to improve it, just as they will give feedback on the subject content. And also, finally, that there is promotion and use of active learning. There are many ways to do this, and I think we feel that active learning is the key to CLIL. That you have to use active pedagogy in order for students to be able to communicate confidently and freely. So just a teacher talking and the students being quiet is not a very productive way of CLIL. Just to share an anecdote with you, I hope they are not listening, but I saw a CLIL lesson once, or it was supposed to be a CLIL lesson, and it was just a history teacher talking. He had a wonderful story, a wonderful lesson, but it was just him talking and the students being quiet. So when we evaluated the lesson, we said, look, why did the students not say anything? And the teacher says, well, that is obvious, because a good lesson in a good classroom situation, students don't speak. I want order and quiet in my classes. Now, that can be this can be a pedagogical approach, but it is not an approach that is very conducive, very productive for CLIL. Now, of course, schools don't become CLIL schools overnight. Teams don't become CLIL teams overnight. Schools have to go, teachers have to go through training. And this is to give you an example of what teams do to become CLIL teams. So, as you know, when a school starts a CLIL department and wants to do 50% of the lessons through CLIL, that means that a lot of teachers have to become CLIL teachers. It's not just one solitary teacher, it's a whole team. So the first step usually is to do a course in classroom English from a nearby university, from traveling teachers, there are traveling trainers that are quite active in the Netherlands, which is usually combined with a CLIL course. How do I do classroom management in English? How do I talk about the things that are pertinent to a classroom? Because the idea is that the language becomes 100% English, and it's not illegal to use Dutch in the CLIL classroom, but we want to give teachers as many tools as possible to speak English, and also speak it in situations that are not necessarily connected to the subject. Then teachers do a formal certificate, because schools also have to prove, which is also in the standard, that teachers have level B2. And this is done mostly through Cambridge exams. They go through the Cambridge Advanced exam and then do the Cambridge Proficiency exam. That's a pretty high level of English, which in itself, I stress, in itself is not enough to be a good CLIL teacher, but it does help to certify your language level and to have a command of language that allows you to be creative with it, we think. And then perhaps the most important thing is the language course abroad, which obviously at the moment is also impossible, but in normal circumstances, in non-COVID circumstances, teachers go abroad to, for instance, a college like Hildestone in England, where they do an English course, often also combined with CLIL. And this is also a great team building experience, with history teachers, geography teachers, biology teachers going through a language course together. Now, those are things that we do that happen with teachers that currently work in schools, but there is also quite a development now for teachers that are in training. We have a number of BA and master level CLIL training courses. One of them is the World Teachers Training Program at Leiden University. Another is UTeach at Utrecht University. Those are master level international CLIL type training programs. So they become certified teachers with a specialization in CLIL and international education. There are also a number of bachelor level courses, some minors, some major, but what I'm trying to say is that there is a whole landscape developing of teacher training in CLIL at teacher training institutes. And also important to mention is that there are now 2 relevant professors in the Netherlands that are pertinent to CLIL that you may have heard of, and if you haven't heard of them, it's now a good time to introduce their names. First, Professor Rick de Graaf, who works at Utrecht University, who is a full professor of modern language pedagogy. He used to be a professor of CLIL pedagogy, but he has now moved on to a full chair of language pedagogy. But still does a lot of work in CLIL, and he has a number of PhD candidates that also write their thesis on CLIL and CLIL schools. And the other one that is important to mention is I would say, our very own professor, because she works at Amsterdam University, Professor Joanna Duarte, and it is the chair supported by NUFIC in bilingual education and world citizenship. She's a special professor of bilingual education and world citizenship. So they are two of the stars, I would say, two of the academic stars from the Dutch CLIL world, but by no means the only ones. There are a lot of PhDs and teacher trainers that do quite important work in CLIL. Now, the other strand, which is very important in bilingual education, and I think which has been the success of bilingual education, is global citizenship. The idea that students become aware of the world, develop intercultural competences, and really do feel at home in the world. And that doesn't happen overnight. So the idea is that schools, first of all, develop a vision on global citizenship. What does it mean for us to stimulate global citizenship? Why? How does that relate to our pedagogical mission, to what we think is good education? Then, how does this vision translate into the curriculum and the activities? So schools have a real job of developing their curriculum based on global citizenship. And then also, as we said earlier, students have to cooperate internationally through school partnerships. But these school partnerships are, part of a vision on global citizenship. And when you visit Dutch bilingual schools, you'll see that they breathe a sort of international atmosphere. And as I said, the school partnerships are very important because their students actually get to meet partners from abroad, meet students their age in real life, and go through real educational experiences with them. So that is, I think, also important to mention. It's not just about meeting. It's not just about saying hello, and although that is a very important first step. Just as it is to talk about, what you have for dinner in Japan and what you have for dinner in the Netherlands, but that a step further is to do an actual project together, where both sides have information that the other side doesn't have, where you actually need each other to complete the activity or the experience. I think that is what we stimulate in bilingual education, and which lies at the core of bilingual education. And for that, you need a common language, and you need your skills and competences, and so on. Now, personal development, as I said, is the third, but somewhat more difficult strand of bilingual education. And we started to look at this because schools told us, look, our students have bilingual education has other effects than just learning English and than just being at home in the world. Schools report that students have increasing self-confidence, that they have a growing sense of responsibility, that they become critical thinkers, that sort of thing. And we feel that some of those things may be the actual result of bilingual education. So we ask schools to show how students make progress in their personal development, for instance, via the IB Learner Profile. You may know this from the International Baccalaureate. But it's still in its early stages, as I think the picture illustrates. But we are bringing into focus the other effects that bilingual education has. And as I said earlier, there is a quality system. It's one of our tasks to make sure that schools adhere to the standard. We visit all the schools and certify them when they adhere to the standard. And we do this with what we call accreditation visits with committees of external experts. So, for instance, the professors that I mentioned have a place in the accreditation committee, teacher trainers, but also principals from CLIL schools. So we form a committee with a chairperson who is usually a CLIL expert. There is a secretary from NAFIC, but then there is also a principal from another bilingual school and a coordinator, a teacher coordinator from a CLIL school. And together they form ad hoc committees. We use a system of appreciative inquiry. So it basically means that we are not looking for things that are wrong. We are basically looking for things that are good, that are interesting, that are worthwhile to explore. Yet there are the minimum requirements that we still look at and that we also judge beforehand in most cases. So in other words, if students don't reach B2, the school cannot get a certificate. If students don't have an international cooperation, everything can be fantastic, but then there is no accreditation. If Dutch suffers, then there is no accreditation. But for the rest, we try and talk to the schools, look at lessons, talk to teachers, talk to students, sometimes talk to parents, and form an image of this school. And give feedback to the school and talk about what is interesting and what goes well in this school. So while checking the norms from the standard, we use appreciative inquiry, have a positive approach, and then give the school certification, which we also publish. So it is also our responsibility to show that schools follow and adhere to the standard. And we visit them once every 5 years. And when a school fails the accreditation, we come back within 2 years. And I have to say again, in non-COVID times, we visit about 20 schools per year. Now, just to go a little bit deeper into it, we have discovered after years that not everything is measurable. You cannot measure international competence with a ruler. You can measure language ability, to some degree with a certification, with a Cambridge certificate, for instance. So during the accreditation visits in the system of appreciative inquiry, we appreciate that not everything is measurable, and we also look for things that are demonstrable, so schools can show what is going on. For instance, they can show what students have done in their international experiences. They can show the projects that they have done, and we can also talk about what is noticeable. You can't show it, you can't measure it, but you notice that it's there. And especially the field of personal development, there you look for noticeable qualities. We notice that students become more critical. We notice that students become more fully rounded human beings. And then, of course, the question is, well, how do you notice that? And we try to have a meaningful conversation about all the aspects of bilingual education along lines that are measurable, demonstrable, and noticeable. Yes, now, one of my questions is, of course, is this whole system, was this a system of evolution, maybe, or of revolution, when you look at the history of bilingual education in the Netherlands? Well, I think the answer is both. So it is evolutionary in the sense that we started very small and the things developed very evenly out of that. One thing followed very logically from another. But it is revolutionary in the sense that, yes, at some points, real strong decisions were made. the development, the standard developed in an evolutionary fashion, but the fact that we have a standard was pretty revolutionary. And also the step to go to a system of appreciative inquiry, I think was a logical step, but also a revolutionary step. This is the French Revolution, but please use any other revolution that has your preference. Now, here we have a few conclusions. And I would like to draw your attention to the picture on the right there, which is a PhD thesis by a woman called Evelyn van Kampen, who looked at the actual CLIL aspects of bilingual education. So if we look at what we understand by CLIL, what do we see back in bilingual education? And one of her conclusions, I think, is also what I have been trying to show to you, is that bilingual education in the Netherlands is not just CLIL. Intercultural awareness is the key. So we use CLIL as a means to achieve intercultural awareness. And because intercultural awareness is so important, that gives students something that they can profit from for the rest of their lives. Bilingual education is a success, my second conclusion, because schools are in the lead. I'm not sure if this is shown very clearly from my presentation, but there is a network, and the network has a steering committee which consists of school leaders, and we support them and guide them and help them and give feedback. But the process of bilingual education is very much with the schools in the lead of their process. It's grassroots, it's not top-down, it's not forced. The equality system is very important because it stimulates development, and it also gives meaning to the brand of bilingual education. I'm not sure how this is in Japan. In some countries, of course, students will come to the school no matter what, because students are assigned to the school. Not so in the Netherlands. Schools are a bit like companies in that they have to promote and advertise to get students into the school. And we have to be honest, bilingual education is a very strong brand that helps pull students in. And finally, I think it's important to mention that experts are part of the bilingual education ecosystem. So there's an academic community of CLIL experts, teacher trainers, that are through the accreditation visits, can go into the schools and are very much tied in with the network, which makes it stronger, which creates, I think, an ecosystem. My one sentence takeaway is bilingual education is CLIL plus an awful lot else. CLIL plus intercultural awareness. Intercultural awareness is the raison d'etre, the key of bilingual education. And here is another picture of another revolution, which is the Industrial Revolution, to indicate that there is a lot of work still to be done. We are by no means finished, and to indicate that there is a road ahead of us. And I hope this says thank you again through Google Translate. Because it is online, we cannot, and this has been pre-recorded, we cannot answer questions, but please, I urge you and stimulate you, if you have any questions, please just email them, and I will answer them as best I can. And finally, I would like to, I've just added this, I don't have the picture, we plan in the Netherlands to do a very big conference, World CLIL 2022, on 7 and 8 July 2022 in The Hague, the Netherlands. We did one before in 2012, and we had people from all over the world, including Japan. If we are then post-COVID, if we have a vaccine, if it is safe, we will organize this and hope to have around 200 to 300 people in The Hague. And we hope to have a J-CLIL representation. And you will receive, of course, an official invitation once we know a bit more. So when I look at my time, it's about 45 minutes. So thank you very much, and I wish you a very, very pleasant and good, interesting online conference.
Thank you very much, Ono. And unfortunately, we couldn't have a discussion time. But anyway, I'm very happy to hear your nice lecture. And later, we will gather questions or comments. I will send you, so please answer those kind of questions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Big hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.